Welcome to CPF Fire Wire, a podcast from California Professional Firefighters where we discuss a wide range of issues affecting firefighters, our unions, our families, and the communities we serve.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CPF Fire Wire. I am California Professional Firefighters President Brian Rice. Of all the institutions in our society, there's only one whose sole mission is to improve the lives of working men and women, and it's called the union. Professional firefighters have been organizing in unions for more than a century. In California, your local and state unions have fought hard over decades, and the victories we've won have made our firefighters among the best paid, best trained, and best protected in the nation. But as we have often learned over the years, nothing is guaranteed. So I thought it would be good to hear from one of our brother union leaders from another state to hear about the challenges that they face, how they've overcome those obstacles to make a difference for our fellow firefighters. And joining me today is Dave Coker. Dave is a captain with the Greensboro Fire Department in North Carolina. He is also the president of the Professional Firefighters of Greensboro. Dave, welcome to the CPF Firewire.
Thanks for having me on, Brian. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Dave, just give me a little bit and the listeners a little bit about your background, how you became a firefighter, how you got involved with the union, and just kind of who you are and what's going on.
Yeah, I got on the job in Greensboro, North Carolina in 2005. And my involvement, or I guess the reason why I got involved with the local here on the job, really, I came in the door as a believer in the union already. I had spent 5 years as a lineman at Bell South, which is a regional phone company here in the South. And I was really fortunate when I got on the job at the phone company to be able to join a pretty militant, pretty active local that also supported and I would say invested in young members when they wanted to get involved with the local. So,
Dave, what union was that?
CWA, Communication Workers of America, Local 3607 in Greensboro, North Carolina, and had a really broad experience there. I got to, started as a shop steward, became chief steward in the construction department where I was at, had the opportunity to, attend some national CWA events, some AFL-CIO events, and really where I got involved I was most passionate about was organizing. I had the opportunity, I guess you could say an opportunity to do union organizing in Alabama and, Charlotte, Greensboro, basically throughout the state. And then had the opportunity to do organizing work with a pretty broad group of different types of workers in the telecommunications industry, everything from retail to cell tower techs to factory workers. So when I came to the fire department, I already had this in my back pocket. And to me, it was a no-brainer. There was no reason not to join and make it through my probationary period and then get involved. And it started out with our local on the executive board and then moved into was appointed to a vacant vice president position and then was elected president in 2011. And that's a position I've occupied with the local since then.
What I really wanted to talk about were some of the differences, not just the differences, but the successes that you have had in an atmosphere that isn't always geared to, isn't geared for collective bargaining. And quite frankly, you guys and gals in Greensboro, through the years have been successful in that work. And I just want to talk about that. And I'm going to guess some of the tenaciousness that you and the Greensboro firefighters had to maintain to get where you are today.
To answer that question fully, I got to give a little bit of context about the environment that we're in. So listeners understand, that we're constantly rolling the boulder up the hill. North Carolina in 1959 passed General Statute 9598, which at the time not only prohibited public employees from engaging in collective bargaining, right? So they made it illegal for units of government to sit down and engage in a written agreement with public employee unions. But at that time, it also made it illegal for police officers and firefighters to even be union members, period. So our local was Local 947 in Greensboro was originally founded in 1947. 1959, we had to disband because it was illegal, to even be union members.
Wow.
It took a decade to overturn just the portion about membership. So in 1969, our local reformed and police officers and firefighters could be union members again in 1969. But what stayed in place was that Jim Crow era law regarding collective bargaining. So public employees in North Carolina don't have collective bargaining rights. There's nothing that compels the city, county, or the state to sit down with workers in any capacity. So we don't have, union release time. You don't have, unless you work for it, you don't have dues checkoff or dues deduction unless you work for it. There's no method by which you sit down to grieve policy unless you have a local civil service ordinance. And I think more broad, that's very specific to us, but more broadly, we have one of the lowest unionization rates in the nation. Only 3.4% of our workforce in North Carolina is unionized. Oxfam, in a study last year, recognized North Carolina as being the worst place to be a worker in the United States.
Wow.
And that was based on not only the lack of collective bargaining rights, the right to work and at-will employment status, low minimum wage, and next to zero state-level worker protections. And so that's the environment we're in. I'm, as a president of a public employee union in North Carolina, I'm an at-will employee. All my members are at-will employees.
Even Dave, even as a fire captain and a union member, you are an at-will employee. And I think
we do not have just cause protections. We do not have property rights to our jobs. We're at-will employees, and that can and has in other areas of the state, and in our local in the past resulted in discrimination against local union supporters, firing of union members on trumped up charges. The IFF just won a case in Leland, North Carolina, which is closer to the coast, where they essentially, fired the entire executive board of the fledgling local there. So that's the environment that we're in. Now, the flip side of that is what we've been able to do in that environment is related to, what I believe to be an informed and pretty engaged membership on our part, and also there are other locals throughout the state who do really strong union work that have engaged and informed locals. When I became union president, my first official day as local president, the fire chief called and said, "Hey, we've got an $18 million budget shortfall. We're going to cut a ladder company." So that's day one in my union presidency. We ended up stopping that ladder company closure, and we had city council members that wanted us fired for going to the public with what the safety impact would be. And then 3 years later, fast forward, we win through city council every ladder in the city of Greensboro staffed with 4 personnel. So we have 4 personnel across the board. So in 3 short years, we went from we're going to get rid of one to now we're going to fully staff all of them and keep them in place. So we've won dues deduction again by vote of city council. Have had some pretty significant compensation increases through our political advocacy. In 2017, we got a 7.5% pay bump, and every year we're kind of working on compensation as a huge component of what we do. We're able to overturn a 25-year-old local ordinance that prohibited our members from running for office in other areas. So we have a member who's a school board member in his county, which is one county over. We have another member running for school board. We've worked hard over, a decade plus to really build a local union in a very tough environment that delivers bread and butter for our members. But also the way we do that work is that we want to win hearts and minds. And so we do a lot of committee-based work and really try to get a lot of feedback from the members and from our committees that tackle specific issues. And we're always on. There's really never a downtime for us. We're always advocating with our city council about something.
What's interesting is where you started out with, here's what the reality is or could be, meaning everybody is an at-will employee. You can't per se have a collective bargaining agreement. You really come to work, keep your mouth shut, and do your job. To what you created and what the Greensboro firefighters created and your local, which to me is equal to what we're doing here in California. The difference is you guys had to risk it all to get that. And I think that is one of the things, and you and I have talked about this, and you kind of pointed out to me once about taking things for granted, and I don't want to say becoming complacent, but it was kind of that type of a conversation. And what I really came out of that for me with Greensboro, North Carolina, you guys are about 800 members, right? 700 to 800?
We're around 582.
Yeah, 582, which is very similar to the department I worked for here in Sacramento, very similar to Sacramento City. But the difference is, and I think this is what I want anybody who listens to this, the Greensboro firefighters risked it all to have an active union, to have kind of the rights and privileges that many places enjoy because that's the law of the land. And for me, every firefighter should sit with that for a minute. Many of us do the same job across the country, but sometimes the stakes aren't always the same. Things could change in a heartbeat, no matter where you work. And that brings me to this one. I wanted you to talk about a little bit because I hear it a lot as a state president. We shouldn't do politics. We shouldn't be involved in politics. They're crooked. We just give them money. The overall message, we shouldn't be involved in politics. It's kind of, you're the one guy that I could go, Dave, what would that actually look like potentially?
There'd be no method by which we could make gains for our members if we didn't engage with our city council and with our general assembly. We wouldn't have anything. Some of us fight for things, right? Mm-hmm. And some of us fight for the right to exist. And then we have to fight for things on top of that. We have to fight for the right to exist, create. If there's not already a structure to advocate or a structural lever that we can pull to be part of the decision-making process, we have to create that based on the opportunities that are available to us politically. And if we weren't engaged in politics at the local and state level, everything I rattled off about our victories from the past decade, we wouldn't have. There'd be nothing compels management to sit down with us other than our advocacy through our city council and our elected leaders.
It doesn't matter where you work, whether it's California, it doesn't matter. It can change in a heartbeat. That's why it's so important as a union and union leaderships that we are involved and visible in the political process from the very smallest district all the way up to the state house and the federal government. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And my friend Robbie Hunter used to say that a lot. He was a state building trades president, and it is so true. We all kind of sit back and we feel like the battle has been had, the battle has been won, we've got this, we've got that. But it really, truly never ends. Are you guys seeing any pressures due to the Janus decision that concerns you or that you're watching?
I mean, certainly there's groups that are, sending mailers directly to, IFF members throughout the country, that those places that are really impacted by Janus. But for us, for South Carolina, for Georgia, Florida, Janus had next to no impact. And I don't mean to sound callous about it, but it's like for us without collective bargaining rights, I mean,
you're already there.
What it did to firefighters in California made them right to work employees. In all reality, to be a right to work employee would be a step in the right direction for North Carolina firefighters because we would have to have a union contract in place.
Interesting.
Right. So there's a huge education component to Janus. Very seasoned, very smart, very capable union leaders who have a whole bunch of track record of wins and know a lot of stuff. I find still sometimes get tripped up with the concepts of at will, right to work, non-collective bargaining. Right to work is essentially, it means that if there's a union contract at your job, or if there's a collective bargaining agreement at your job, You don't have to be a member of the union, and you can get all the stuff, right? There's various window dressings that make it better or worse throughout the states that were impacted by Janus, but at its base, that's what it is.
Yeah.
We don't have a contract. So in reality, we're exempt from right to work laws. We're just at-will employees. So I was having this conversation with a labor attorney out in New York one time, and he was like, so you're telling me you're in favor of right to work? I said, no, absolutely not. Right to work represents an anti-labor, anti-worker legislative sentiment. But you got to understand, we've got it so bad where I come from. We would love to have an environment like Florida, Texas, Oklahoma. These are all places that have been right to work, that have really strong, high density unions that operate at a high level. It is easy in these environments that are impacted by Janus, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it's easy for local leaders or state leaders to treat the union like they're, flow from progressive, right? Where we just talk about, here's, sign the card, here's your insurance, here's your contract. Business as usual is really boring. And you don't create loyalty or activists if business as usual is comparable to being an insurance salesperson. Janus presents, for firefighters in California, for instance, leaders in California, Janus presents a unique opportunity to take a second look at how they engage with their members. Like, are we working to win hearts and minds? Are we giving our members the tools they need to understand why it is important to stick together on the job, why it is important to be politically active, why it is important to be engaged with the local or with their union? Janus gives us the opportunity to do that with a fresh set of eyes.
That's a very interesting discussion on at will versus right to work. Right to work is a step up from at will. The members in Greensboro and departments that are similar risk it all to have an active local. Let's talk about some of the things, because I know you guys have had some successes in North Carolina, both locally and then at a state level. But what are some of the important victories that that the firefighters in North Carolina have had?
I think one of the most prominent that comes to mind is state level victory. Our state association, the Professional Firefighters of Paramedics of North Carolina, won starting January 1 of this year. Was we finally have presumptive protections, and we went from zero cancer presumption protections to a pretty generous benefit. We found out last week we have a member who has been diagnosed with a cancer, and looking at, we sort of did the victory lap when the legislation was passed, and then it's like, oh, now it's here, it's on our doorstep. We've got to figure out, are they eligible? What's the process by which we start this conversation with the member and with HR, and it was over a decade long work by our state association and locals throughout North Carolina that brought that victory to fruition. And mind you, we have a Democratic governor, and our House and Senate are controlled by Republicans, and so it's a testament, I think, to the strong bipartisan work that our state association has been able to engage in for a pretty long time to win something extremely substantive for firefighters in our state. Something as simple as dues deduction, right? Like something that I think is such an easy thing for folks in a collective bargaining environment to take for granted. It took us 3 years, a concerted campaign of 3 years. Members and non-members alike signed petitions. We took it to the city manager, who kicked it over to the city council. And finally, the city said, okay, we'll provide dues deduction, but you got to pay $1,000 to get it started. And you have to have you got to pay for it every year, just for the data entry piece of it. So it's a huge victory for us. So, everything from a big victory like presumptive to something as simple as, hey man, just take my union dues out of my paycheck.
Yeah.
That's the depth and breadth of work that we have to engage in.
I know you're doing political action across the nation for the IAFF. And what are some of the things that you're seeing, things that are being looked at in areas that maybe we all need to look at How are locals across the nation looking as far as having organized PACs, PAC committees, PAC funds, that type of thing? Are we kind of all in the same boat, or is that something we need to pay closer attention to?
For locals in my state and in the Carolinas, Georgia, that's where I would be most familiar with this type of discussion. A lot of locals do not have PACs, and a lot of those locals that don't have PACs are also locals that aren't successful, that have a tough time moving on issues, even in tough environments. I could say for us, like when we opened our PAC and started engaging elected officials through our PAC fund, it's like we walked in the door and turned the lights on. That it's as stark as that. So I think in the South, there's sometimes a hesitancy to get involved in local politics, but anecdotally, I can say that those locals who are not engaged consistently in local politics don't put a lot of wins on the board for their members.
You hit the nail on the head. Your level of involvement in politics is really going to, you'll be able to engage the level of your involvement pretty much by your wins and losses for the most part. I mean, let's just, kind of cut the BS on it, but that is where it comes down to. Now, that doesn't mean that if you get involved and have a strong PAC and you're really working, you win everything. Sometimes it can take, like you said, dues checkoff took 3 years. We just did a retirement correction that took several years. I mean, we have a lot of those that sometimes you got to go through. You can get them through the state, through the legislature, the assembly, and the Senate, but the governor may or may not sign it. And if he doesn't sign, you're back to starting all over again. Hey, you can be lucky and get the one off. Hey, we brought it up and we passed it. I think COVID, the presumptive on that kind of speaks for that. We're in the middle of a pandemic, you have established, that makes sense. But you have other, whether it's presumptive illness or injury, that it could take a long time. You guys in Greensboro, you're basically 100% membership, right? Or close to it.
I just looked at the numbers today, 94.8%.
Wow.
Capacity. Yeah.
And that is a testament to the work. You're creating a lot of the successes that are in contracts in areas of California in an environment that is vastly different. If you could speak to the level and the strength of solidarity that your members have and being in for the cause, even though I'll bet your members are just like ours, there are personal differences. Talk to me about the solidarity that it has taken for your members and the fact that where are they focused at? Personal, professional, and how did they get there?
When I came on the job, we had 30% membership density, right? 2005, 30% membership density. And when we started our organizing campaign, which was multi-year, we went to non-members, sat down face-to-face at firehouses and answered questions and listened to their feedback and concerns and criticisms and put a message on the table. And so part of our success and our solidarity is that one-on small group membership engagement component. The other piece is, I think, how we message. We can talk to you, 7 days a week and twice on Sunday about the economic benefit of being part of Local 947, the PFF-PNC, and the IFF. We can show you the return on investment for your dues. And we do that. We talk about that sort of transactional nature, but we also sort of have this ideology of the transformational nature of your union on a job. Through our union, working together, we can make our workplace better and safer for us and our families. And we can transform our workplace through organizing, staying together, and relying on each other. And that's everything as simple as if you have a sick member or a member has a family member that's sick, the entity that's going to organize the meal train for that family while they're in the hospital is the union. If we have a member who has fallen on hard times financially through, injury or illness or whatever the case, guess who's going to do the golf or t-shirt fundraiser, right? It's going to be their union. This is the vehicle by which we can make positive change, that we can protect our families, that we can protect our livelihoods, that we can make a difficult and dangerous job safer, and hopefully retire with some dignity. And so whether you're in California or North Carolina, I think that message resonates. Again, the drapes on the message are going to be different. The criticisms, concerns are going to be different. But overall, that message, I think that is what's led to our victories. It is, that has led to high membership density in a very tough environment where union membership is not required and in many ways is not officially recognized. We're the entity that is looking out for you on the job at the state level, at the local level, at the federal level. And so I would say to California firefighters is you have a lot of apparatus in place that makes this work easier, but you have to look no further than Wisconsin to see that apparatus taken away from you through one election and at the stroke of a pen. And it, doesn't matter what party. I always kind of joke that the only thing Democrats and Republicans can agree on in North Carolina is how much they hate workers. In my role as union president, I'm agnostic when it comes to party affiliation. I don't care. I do not care. What I care about is where you stand on the issues that impact us, my members, and their families. And I think that's also a message that hopefully resonates with IFF members wherever they're from.
A lot of our members as firefighters, they quite frankly, a lot of us feel like we're in a special category. And because we're very popular with the public, we have a very high opinion rating, we feel like we're protected. As someone in a state that's pretty anti-labor, what do you think of that perspective, and what kind of advice would you give someone that has that mindset? Certainly,
firefighters, enjoy a certain level of respect by the general public, but don't think for a second that necessarily translates to continued protections or increasing gains through your elected officials. They love us at election time. They love to take a picture with us. And I think we're special because I'm a firefighter and I, love the men and women I work with. But at the same time, this notion that somehow we're better or we're special or they love us, that perspective is just laughable to me because they will take from you in a heartbeat. What would you say to California firefighters about the importance of union strength, solidarity, and protecting and being able to protect them on the job? Your strength on the job, your solidarity, your engagement with your union is paramount to your survival. It really, I'm not trying to be dramatic, but it really is that stark. When your unity erodes, you have less of a voice at the bargaining table. Management knows if there are certainly any sort of significant divisions within the ranks, and they'll exploit those. Again, we can look at Wisconsin. It's sort of the seat of progressive politics historically in the U.S., sort of like progressive populism. They're very had public employee collective bargaining very early on. It should be a wake-up call for firefighters in historically strong union environments that one election and one stroke of the pen can take everything from you. If you're not united, if you don't engage with your union, doesn't mean there's not going to be discussion or debate. All that's healthy, but we got to remember that the union is our vehicle to make positive change on the job and keep bad things from happening to us and our families. And if we let that solidarity and that unity erode, that's going to have real-time, tangible impacts on us, both in the short term and in the long term. Dave, I appreciate your time. Any last thoughts? Again, I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you all today. One thing I would say, if I can do some personal plugging, is I do have a Substack, hashtag Organize the South, where I write about the nuts and bolts of how to build more effective local unions. So it's a fairly new project, but it's something I've been excited about. And in addition to that, if we got any labor history nerds out there, I'm a board member of the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum. So I would encourage folks to check out the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum. It's about the struggle for unionization in the Mountain South and in Appalachia. And the museum is a great testament to the dignity of working people in their unions. So wvminewars.org if anybody's interested.
Dave, it's been an honor to have you join us today in just this discussion. It's super important for our members to understand the fights that are going on around this country on union firefighters' behalf, and even more so for every single one of us. We cannot let our guard down, and we cannot let anything be taken for granted. With that, my guest has been Dave Coker, President of the Professional Firefighters of Greensboro, North Carolina. And want to thank you again, Dave. And once again, I'm Brian Rice. This is the latest edition of the CPF Fire Wire. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch y'all next time.
You can find CPF Fire Wire at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, or wherever you find podcasts. Be sure to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. You can also find CPF Fire Wire at the CPF website, www.cpf.org, and on the CPF YouTube page. We're always interested in getting your feedback, comments, and criticism. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. Drop us a line, info@cpf.org. CPF Firewire is a production of California Professional Firefighters. Our producer is Carol Wills. Our engineer is Matt McDermott. Please join us next month for another edition of CPF Firewire.